Hello and welcome back everyone. In this e-lecture, we introduce one level of the three different levels of semantic analysis. So if you recall, we said that semantic analysis can be done on three different levels. The first is the word level, and so we call this word semantics. The second is the sentence level, and the third is the utterance level. Now our main interest here is within word semantics, and this is going to be the topic for the next few e-lectures. Now in semantics, the branch of word semantics is given another name. Sometimes it's called lexical semantics. So let's begin now with word semantics or lexical semantics. There are two main things that we look at within the field of lexical semantics, and that is reference and sense. So let's take a look at a quick example so we can get the feel of what the difference is between reference and sense. So let's imagine a scenario here where in front of us is this dog. One person might yell, "Watch out for the dog." Now the phrase "the dog" here in this situation is used to refer to this dog that they have in front of them. So when the speaker said "the dog," the speaker intends to refer to this dog right here. And so the dog is the object of this reference, which we call the referent. Okay? So then reference is a speaker act. It shows the intention of the speaker. What we mean by this is that when the speaker yelled out, "Watch out for the dog," that the speaker used the phrase "the dog" to refer to that dog in front of him or her. Now imagine you were listening to the person speaking here, and you hear the phrase "the dog" before you actually see the dog in the real world. How would you understand the sentence uttered by speaker A? How would you understand the phrase "the dog" before you have got a chance to look at the actual dog in the world? Well, you would hear the phrase "the dog" and think of a mental image that represents what you think dog is. So this mental image that we have here is what we call a concept. It's a mental representation of what you think a dog is. This is what we call sense. Now part of being able to make reference or to refer to something is partly based on our knowledge of the sense of the thing. So I know, for example, just by knowing the sense of the word dog, that this is a dog. And I also know that this is not a dog, just because I know the sense of the phrase dog or the word dog. This would not be a dog. So really, the sense of an expression determines what can and what cannot be a representative or a referent of the word dog. So what we just drew is an example of something called the semiotic triangle, first introduced by Ogden and Richards, The Meaning of Meaning, 1923. The semiotic triangle explains to us how we get to meaning out of a linguistic expression. So when we uttered the phrase "the dog," this is what we call a linguistic expression. This linguistic expression itself denotes an object in the real world. What we mean by denotes here is that the linguistic expression stands as a signal that signifies the actual object in the world. So that is the meaning of the word denote, or I'm sure you've heard of this, denotation. Now denotation is a purely linguistic phenomenon. This is not part of what the speaker does. This is what the linguistic expression does all by itself. Now in uttering the phrase or the linguistic expression "the dog," like we said, immediately what pops up into mind is the sense of the expression. Now the sense of the expression has one function, which is mainly to determine which objects in the world may be considered a dog and which may not be. Now if you notice, we did not depict reference in this triangle, and there's a good reason for that. Just take a look at this difference. So sense, the sense of an expression, seems to be a stable relationship. Every time we mention dog, we probably come up with the same mental image in our brains. Now this mental image will of course always determine or limit the possibilities of what could be dog in the real world, practically almost in the same way every time. The word dog as a signal or as a linguistic expression also has a stable relationship in that it always denotes an object in the world that qualifies as dog. So denotation is also a stable relationship. Reference, on the other hand, just like we mentioned before, is a speaker act. It has to do with the speaker and their intentions and the context it was used in. So for example, instead of the dog, I could have easily referred to it as that ugly thing. Now that ugly thing probably wouldn't immediately pick out the exact same sense we're looking for here, but imagine we are in a park and the only ugly thing in front of us is this dog, and I utter, "Look at that ugly thing." Now in this case, I intended for the expression, that ugly thing, to refer to the dog in front of us. It was my intention, so that's a speaker intention. And I had in mind that the listener would be able to understand what my intention was. Therefore, it makes sense now to distinguish the characteristics of reference, denotation, and sense. So both denotation and sense are stable relationships. Denotation is purely linguistic, and so it is a stable relationship between linguistic expression, or the word, and the actual object or thing in the real world. So say for example, you walk into a classroom and there is a teacher, but the teacher is very young and looks just like any other student. Now you might want to talk about this person and might use the linguistic expression or the word, the student, to talk about the teacher. Now, the student will always mean student. It will always pick out the same object in the real world, regardless of what I meant it to pick out. That is why we call a stable relationship. Now going back to reference, when I said the student, my intention was to pick out the teacher, okay? So in this case, this is not a stable relationship because student here obviously was used to refer to something that's not a student. Now what specified what the student here referred to in this case? Well, it was the speaker and the intention that the speaker had under that particular context. Why under that particular context? Because in another situation I might use student to refer to a person that works at the university by mistake. So this is not a stable relationship at all. So now that we talked about the basic differences between reference, sense, and denotation, it makes sense to look at a few different cases or various cases of reference. Now sometimes, in some cases, reference can be constant. Constant does not mean that it's a stable relationship, but rather that in every single time a person utters a linguistic expression, that person should and must mean exactly the same thing. So take for example moon. Now it would be very difficult to imagine a situation where one says the moon, that actually means the table. So the moon constantly or always refers to the actual moon we see in the sky. Likewise, sun would always refer to the sun. Another case of reference is where you have no physical referent. Example, function words like or the or in or is. So these words of course have no physical referent. Also abstract notions. Take for example love, hate, idea. Also myth, creatures, or people. Take for example popular example, which is unicorn. Now the unicorn does not exist in the real world, but we can still talk about something called a unicorn. In this case, the linguistic expression unicorn has no physical referent in the real world, meaning that it does not pick out a physical object in the real world. A third case of reference is where one expression picks out multiple reference in the real world. So for example, imagine you walk into the classroom and there are 10 female students, and you utter the expression, the girl. Now, what does the girl pick out here? Well, it might pick out Mary, it might pick out Sally, it might pick out Sarah, right? So the same expression has several different references. A fourth type is when you have multiple expressions all picking out the same exact thing. So one object or one reference. For example, take the expression Donald Trump. Take the expression the President of the USA. Take the expression star of the Apprentice show. All three of these are three different expressions that all refer to the same person in the real world, who is Donald Trump. Alright, so let's quickly summarize what we've been doing here so far. In today's class, we talked about reference, talked about sense, denotation, semiotic triangle, talked about linguistic expressions, and let's make a quick difference now between a linguistic expression and something we call a referring expression. What's the difference? Well, anything could be a linguistic expression. It could be dog, could be at, could be the. But not each and every one of these is used to refer to something in the real world. So out of these linguistic expressions, only dog is a referring expression because it can be used to refer. So if a linguistic expression can be used to refer, then it would be called a referring expression as well. So every referring expression is a linguistic, but not vice versa. We also talked about different cases of reference. One where you have constant reference, the other where there's no physical reference, and then one where there's one expression but multiple reference, and then multiple expressions picking out the same reference. The end. Please be sure to watch our next videos where we go into more detail about sense and more details about reference and the like. Have a good day.